It's been a while, but for the first time since the end of the 2017 season, it is with a great sense of pride and a great sense of many emotions, folks. But with that, we say good afternoon and or good evening, WNBA and women's basketball fans. For the first time since the end of the 2017 season, we are back here on the WNBA 365 network, live and in full from the Central Hub Studios in San Diego for both two amazing reasons. First and foremost, this begins our fourth year of operation as we get set for the 2018 WNBA season. But also, folks, this is a milestone I would never have envisioned ever coming to fruition when we started this network 4 years ago in February of 2014. But, folks, this is WNBA 365 at 365. This is our 365th show. We're going to be here for at least the next hour and a half to 2 hours, hopefully, depending on how much time we actually will have free this afternoon. But folks, it is a great, again, honor and privilege to once again welcome you folks back to San Diego. Again, I know that we've had some problems here on YouTube, or we had some stuff that we encountered over the season with either work schedules or what have you, but we are back and kicking off year number 4. And finally, folks, kicking off our coverage 1 month exactly away from opening night 2018. Of course, folks, good evening, good afternoon. Campbell here, joining you here from the Central Hub Studios in San Diego. Joined tonight, or for the time being, by one of our great WNBA loyal contributors, the one and only Smooth Friday, also a member of the Barber's Chair Network. Smooth, good evening, buddy. Hey, great to see you again. We know that we've been obviously in touch the past 3 weeks trying to line up this this momentous occasion, but thanks for coming on and helping us out this afternoon.
Well, first and foremost, I want to congratulate you. Obviously, it's a great achievement thinking about what goes into each and every individual show. 365 is a crazy, crazy number. And I know exactly what you mean when you're talking about not envisioning it from the beginning, because typically it starts as just a little rosebud, a little idea in your head as you're envisioning this great concept. So definitely congratulations there. And it's always a pleasure to join you. It's always a dope opportunity to continue and take an opportunity to expand the dope brand and the dope product, the dope art form that is basketball and women's basketball in general. So I'm excited to be here and talk some hoops.
Now, Smoothie, thank you, of course, for your hard work, and thanks for the kind words as well, folks. Again, this is WNBA 365 at 365. 4 years in the making, folks. Not quite 4 years to the day that we actually came to you folks live on air for the first time. And I want to quickly say thanks to Todd Mintz, our contributor on Facebook, who said that the feed is coming in good. Of course, folks, we had some very, very fluky audio issues during our social stream on Monday. So we actually did a live test on our Facebook page today to ensure that we were going to have audio. Just don't really know what happened still. But with that, folks, of course, like we do here on YouTube, and of course, as we have done for the past 19 or 20 episodes on Facebook, of course, this is your platform, your chance to shine. If you are a WNBA or women's basketball fan, do so via Facebook or on Twitter. Of course, at WNBA 365 or at Calimac3, or find Smooth on Twitter. It's at the Flyest Hoopa, Hoopa is his Twitter handle. Or, of course, light up our live chat box, which I have open too on my screen here, so we can, of course, get your insight and your thoughts. So, folks, I guess to kind of sit down first, again, we're going to get to a lot here that we're going to be covering over, as mentioned, in the next hour and a half to 2 hours here on the program here today. But again, want to more so sit here for a bit and somewhat, again, talk about the whole process of starting this network and everything that we have done along the way. And again, folks, if you have been a loyal network backer, network supporter, I guess, if you've been with us here for as long as we've been here, again, this whole idea to start this YouTube channel to talk exclusively WNBA women's basketball all started during my first year of college. Again, 4 years ago, I was attending broadcasting school here in San Diego, working at an actual radio station. And I came up with the idea about a week after I started as a way for not just practice for me to improve myself as an announcer and a broadcaster, but also as a way to, I guess, start a new trend, I guess, for WNBA fans and women's basketball fans, for news, for scores, for updates, and to somewhat, I'm not going to say being a trailblazer or anything, because obviously there's been people that have done this way longer than I've been in the WNBA and women's basketball world, at least podcasting to the public, at least. But it was a way I think for a lot of people, probably like Smooth and a lot of other of our friends and followers that, of course, have been wanting more information and more than just having to read negative comments on the web about the sport or a certain team or what have you. And I guess, Smoove, when you probably saw this thing start, of course, folks, we were LA Sparks 365 opening day for I think the first year and a half, maybe before we actually became WNBA 365. Smoove, when you probably saw this thing being developed, you probably stumbled across maybe our Twitter feed, you saw a show maybe. What was like, maybe as an outsider looking into the product that we were trying to bring, what was your initial like first thoughts when you saw, a couple male sports fans actually talking positively about the WNBA and also about the women's basketball world, when you probably saw us maybe 4 years ago, maybe about 364 episodes before this afternoon?
Absolutely. The thing about women's basketball, I talked a little bit about niches before we got on the air. But it's definitely a niche sport. I think when you talk about women's basketball and what the proponents and the women involved are trying to do in terms of expanding the brand, I think they have great intentions. Me being who I am and someone who understands the product the way that I do, it's a little bit different for me. I don't necessarily spend as much time trying to convince the uninterested viewer. I've always been a big supporter and a big proponent of the idea that you invest your time and energy into those people that love and support you, as opposed to trying to convince those who don't. And so in this scenario, in this situation, coming across the network initially, it was something that I figured I had experienced before, just in terms of seeing, exactly what you mentioned, the initial interest there, the opportunity to invest time and energy and extra reps in your craft and getting the practice available and necessary to take the next steps in your career. And what I've seen consistently happen is that when those next steps happen, when those layers start to build, the women's basketball focus and the interest starts to waver off. And I started to notice and see that there was a little bit more of an understanding once you mentioned it yourself. The initial beginning was a dedicated network to the Sparks, which was where your interest was initially grabbed. And then transitioning to WNBA 365, I think that was around the time that I followed the account and started really paying close attention, because that's when I started to realize that, the time that you had spent was actually invested well. You had learned from the mistakes that were made. You paid attention to the comments and the interest that was there. And it was from there that, my interest was piqued. I always made sure that I was paying attention and available for you in terms of opportunities to grow and continue to expand this beautiful sport and this art form that we call women's basketball.
Looks like we have our one of our other loyal network correspondents, Todd Mintz, actually joining us now from somewhere in Orange County, California. Todd, it looks like you're muted, buddy, but if you can hear us, what's on your mind, man? Oh, okay. So we'll probably come back to that momentarily. But Smoove, I think you were right, though, in regards to this whole thing. And again, thanks very much. But as mentioned again, we're trying trying very, very hard and very, obviously, as I've said plenty of times on here, a while back too, was for the fact of, really, letting fans get their input or their point across was probably the biggest reason as to why, this network has, I think grown and grown and grown, Smoove, as you alluded to. Because again, I said this, I think, too, a while back on one of our Facebook live streams, was that, we're always wanting fans' input on things in regards to what have you, in regards to plenty of, questions I pose, either it's poll questions or I want people to, share their thoughts on this whole deal. It looks like Todd is back. Todd, if you can hear us, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Can you hear me okay, Callan?
You're good, man. What's up?
Okay, hi. This is the first time I've done this, guys, so bear with me. I'm trying to figure it out. Hey, nice to meet you, Pat. I'm glad I have a lot to say. I think it's really super that we've been able to go 4 years with this. I've been part of it for 3, and it's been an absolute joy, and it's just been incredible how this network has come on so great since it first started, and how it has grown now to the point we are getting a tremendous increased viewership with the Twitter feeds and everything. We have come an awful long way, and it's an amazing 360-degree turnaround from where it started to where it is today. And, it was a privilege that about 3 years ago, I was able to do one of these shows, and we were able to do it live from the Honda Center during an arena football game. And that was one of the greatest times I ever had, to be able to talk hoops from a a different venue like that. And it's just unbelievable how far everything has come with the gamut with this since it started. And I really think we're gonna have a great year coming up, Callan.
Thank you very much, man. So again, folks, you can chime in, of course, Twitter, what have you, live chat box, even, of course, both open for you folks going forward. I guess, guys, to further this on real quick again, and Todd, thanks for dropping in and helping us out somewhat here. Again, still some people, folks, that may be joining us again here this evening, but again, we sadly, folks, Myron Crawford just told us to move during when we were off air. Had to cancel today due to his AAU team was doing something, I believe, for the NCAA today, so he was unable to join us. But we are, again, could have a couple more people joining us, perhaps maybe within the next 50 minutes or so. We'll see what does happen. Obviously, put out an email about 3 weeks ago, and the response was a little bit but we, of course, are going to, as mentioned, try our best to continue to build off of what we have, of course, done with our social streams on Facebook. We'll get into all that, of course, sometime during the course of the program. And I guess we'll go to Todd with this one to start. And of course, Todd, I know, man, it's been tough, obviously, either us going to a game and also even tougher for me, I think, to keep people posted or keep people updated. Because usually once we get into, into a groove during the course of the season, we usually here are, pumping out shows on YouTube every night usually. But of course, there hasn't been a chance to do that, of course, with, so much going on with me down here in San Diego. But of course, we went the avenue TM and also moving on the avenue course, guys of the network social streams on Facebook, which I think has done nothing but wonders because, of course, Todd, usually, folks, as I mentioned, is usually the guy that's giving you news on Facebook. I more so just kind of, monitor what's going on. And then if there's something I have to announce in regards to programming, it's usually where I come in and help things out, both on Facebook and, of course, I run the Twitter feed. But Todd, we'll start with you on this one. What has been your thoughts, I guess, on how the social streams have really helped things out? I know that we can't really devote a lot of time still yet until after May 9th, when I actually have some free time to actually do something or do more on YouTube. But I guess takeaways so far from the success of the social streams, and also we're going to be keeping these around too during the actual part of the schedule this season.
I think it's been really, really good. I mean, honestly, the Twitter feeds have been absolutely unbelievable. The Facebook Live idea you've had with the live shows has been absolutely a stupendous one. We're getting a lot more feedback than we ever used to get on these. A lot of people are now chiming in, getting their comments. And Pat makes a great point. And trust me, I know this from even indoor football and trying to get people into it. People have a negative reaction. It's very hard to turn people's thoughts around. And really the focus is we have still a large base of all over the world, WNBA fans that are looking for a forum. And our jobs is to basically bring out the news, the entertainment value, talk about these great athletes and these great teams and this great sport, and to increase the presence that we have on the air of these people, to come there with their thoughts and to bring out the people that would normally not contribute or normally would not would just listen and not really contribute to the show, and to bring out the fans that have so much to say. And I think you've done a great job in getting that done. And the Twitter feeds have been good. We're getting these, you're able to report updated news right as it happens. Anything rumorsville or news is always first broken. And I think it's done wonders. It's increased visibility. I've noticed an unbelievable difference over the last year or so. And this is just scratching the surface. I really think we're going to have a really big year on this program. I really think we're about to take the next step because, as you said, we've had podcasts. There are podcasts all over the country. But the thing is, there aren't many people that do what we do and do live shows. I don't know anyone that does live shows on a nightly basis during the season like we do, where we can talk fresh about games that just happened. It's a wonderful thing to talk about. It's a wonderful thing to explore. So I love it. I think it could only get better, honestly.
And Smooth, that was the thing I was saying, though, I think probably on a different, maybe on Facebook, though, is just, by the way, Christy Wilson writes into our chat box is saying hi to everyone. Christy, good to see you, of course. Glad to be back on YouTube finally after the first time since I think the end of last season that we've actually been back on here, of course, for our milestone 365th show. But, Smooth, I think Todd hit it right, though, in regards to that, like I said, David Siegel, Ari, and Eli have probably been doing this podcast thing way longer than I have been, of course. And, of course, they're doing just absolutely wonderful things. And of course, we're not fighting for competition with these guys. So I think we're all trying to form an alliance here to kind of give everyone, I guess, like a different point of view, perhaps from everyone's side of the story. But Mr. Friday, maybe, what would you probably say about how, the reach has been, I guess, or the expansion, I guess, of more and more fans, I guess, taking the podcast game for the WNBA and women's basketball to a whole new level, as we have. And of course, many of our other great correspondents and contributors have also done the same exact thing.
Well, here's the thing, and this is the way that it works. Even my personal interest in the women's game had to grow and add layers over time, and that's the reason why I'm a firm believer in the approach that I have. And it's not necessarily an approach that dismisses those who don't have an interest in women's basketball or tries to discredit their opinion. That's not what the case is at all. I just fully understand, and I'm going to quote Joel Embiid here, but you have to trust the process. And the thing about it is, over the course of time, people and things continue to grow and continue to get better and continue to understand, hopefully. And the thing about it is, guys that are sort of naive to what the women are doing on the basketball court, 9 times out of 10 don't have a background in basketball themselves. So they're watching, and what they want to see is things that they're incapable of doing. And so they watch for things that excite them. And so they're watching for a different purpose. Whereas 10, 15 years later down the line, when that same guy who was insensitive all over Twitter for 5 years has a daughter, and that daughter is looking for little girls and women who look like her and that do things that interest her, it's going to bother him. And those things are going to start to spark an interest in his life. And whether that's WNBA, whether that's models, whether that's women on TV, like Angela Rye, making a difference in our country, regardless of what it is, minds change, people eyes open. And what you have to do is invest the time in this. And I mentioned a little bit about what you've done. And that's why I think you've been successful, is that you paid attention to the people who were paying attention to you. My sort of eye-opening experience of my door to women's basketball was because I was interested because of a history that I brought. And I was looking for places to be able to interact and talk with other people who were watching games. And so, I was plucked from a comment board like Swish Appeal. And, from there, 10 almost 15 years later now, I'm, where I am and investing what I am into the sport because of the love that I have for it. But again, it's all levels. It comes from different places. And I think what continues to be exciting for me is that regardless, there's an interest, there's conversations being had. And even though sometimes you can sort of listen and see that there's varying levels of understanding of the women's game, there's conversations being had that weren't being had before. And I think the ridiculous thing about it is that there's a lot of surface level assumptions about a lot of things in our society. Even having the background that I do in women's basketball, I was naive to the fact that women weren't paid the same. I thought that there was just such a love of basketball that the women went overseas because the WNBA season was so short. So to understand and come full circle to where I am now, it's just really just the understanding and appreciating and investing in, like I said, the process, and really just paying attention to those who have an interest in continuing to invest, like you said, not wanting to compete with those other voices that are out there, really just continuing to empower and invest in and lend platforms to each other. And I think that's something that's exciting when you talk about the future and the growth of the game, when you talk about somebody like an Enrique Wnba being presented the platforms that she has now going forward for women's basketball.
And Christy Wilson, Degrees guy, she writes in the chat box saying she's been a fan of the WNBA since the beginning. All it took was watching the sparks and sting on television and made her a fan. And I think it's probably with a lot of us here, either college games that we've gone to, pro games, what have you, that, of course, made us all fans. And I guess, Todd, to go back to you as we, we'll get into some basketball talk momentarily, fellas, and those of you joining us here today, thanks again for being here this afternoon on somewhat short notice. And I know that we had put out a pretty big email, as I said recently, about 3 weeks ago, to get some more people on here. But, of course, schedules didn't align with some of our guests. But, of course, we still could have a few more joining us sometime here this evening. But, Todd, so let's look at 2018 for us. Obviously, I can break this news, but Todd and I are going to be trying to do a Sunday podcast, audio only, probably on Mixcloud, to somewhat talk more about the games and talk about the week and somewhat give you a preview of the week ahead that's going to be starting up during the first week of the season. So around roughly around May 18th, around that time. But Todd, as said though, and I think that you put this up maybe on our Facebook page, and I was really excited to talk or break this news though when we, said, and somewhat, as I said, in talking about Smooth's point though, in regards to, again, not competing with Ari and Eli and his crew or anyone else that has done podcasts. But, I tuned into some of Ari and his crew stuff during the season. I mean, the pregame stuff, the halftime stuff, like, we need to definitely try and do this. So, of course, folks, again, if you didn't catch that press release, but again, we are trying out and experimenting, but going to be trying to have our network social streams will become pregame, halftime, and postgame shows, along with, of course, our YouTube programming here, starting this season. Again, we're working on all those details, all those names that I've been talking about. So, Todd, I know that you were very enthused about this. So what do you make about, again, trying to, expand the digital content platform for the network? Because, again, as you've told me plenty of times, that the Facebook Live has been a very great and brainy idea. So now that we're taking that and now putting it now in regards to, not just one a day, but maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4. And, of course, coming back here on YouTube every night and, of course, recapping all the action.
I think it's a tremendous thing because I've always been able to put my thoughts on for the last year or so on the Facebook page because I try to be educated. I try to watch every game. If I don't watch every game, I watch about 80% of them. And thankfully, that's because of WNBA access. For very inexpensive cost, you can watch all the games you want. And it really helps. It educates you because anybody can read a box score. And the thing that we try to do is we try to dwell more into, what happened during the game and trends and things that happen. And you only can know that by actually paying attention and watching and listening and studying and reading quotes. And, I have a very good general knowledge of the game. But, as I said, I think because of the athleticism in this league now and all these young players coming in and the way the game has evolved and changed from what was a slower kind of half-court game the first few years of this league to now where we're having so much excitement and running up and down the court and team styles have changed with the times. These games are unbelievably great. And this gives us a fresh forum and a fresh forum for people that have just watched the games to be able to go on the air and comment on it and give their thoughts fresh in their minds of what they saw, what excited them, what players did great, and think anything they would like to talk about. So I think it's great that we're able to preview games, that we can recap games thoroughly. We can talk about the way teams are trending. And it opens us up. I think it just opens us quite a bit more, Kellen.
Smooth, what do you think? I mean, obviously, I think that was the other big thing, though. I remember as a talking point when we started this network, as mentioned 4 years ago, was, again, giving, ourselves, not giving me, but, of course, giving fans, giving them an outlet or a place to come and vent or talk about their team or what have you. And again, we really didn't have a whole lot of that at our disposal, maybe, 3-4 years ago when we came on here. Again, not saying that that we're trailblazers again, starting this whole platform thing. Again, as mentioned, there's been people that have been doing this way longer than I have been, of course. But, what do you think, though, Smooth, I guess, as we look at this as giving fans, yet another way, I guess, to somewhat talk about their teams, before the game starts, at halftime, and, of course, as well, at the end of the games, and, of course, at the end of the night, when all the games are finally set in stone?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic because at the end of the day, we still have to consider that this is a relatively young league. And when we talk about the growth of the game and the level of play, it's something that's changed drastically in a very short period of time. It's something that continues to expand the minds of the people that watch it, us fans. And as we've continued to watch the league and players get better, opportunities like this have presented itself. And the thing about it is, and the difficulty for so long for somebody like me, was that for so long there was always such a disconnect in terms of the layers of coverage in basketball. And that was because there was a long stretch and there was a long period of time where there were people who didn't necessarily have a background on it or an interest. And I think Ty got a little bit into it. Anybody can look at a box score and talk about the game and give their synopsis of what possibly happened. But, as we've continued to grow and watch the game grow, and there continues to be levels of individuals who are committed to the growth of women's basketball and to presenting platforms and providing opportunities for conversation. I mentioned Swish Appeal as a place that I got my initial start. I was just looking for an opportunity to have a conversation. And, you know, this is around the time that Twitter was getting started. So those conversations started there and rolled over to Swish Appeal, where there was a little bit of a friendlier atmosphere. And I mean, the thing about it is you have to continue to invest. And that's where somebody like myself had to do some you know, some self-discovery and some real adjusting, I guess you could say, because I think there was more that I was able to invest in terms of being able to have conversations and provide platforms for others and being able to support individuals. I think something that gets lost in the day-to-day struggle is that, you know, this really isn't as much of a rat race as we try to make it. You know, the world and the universe is sort of failing because we're not taking care of each other. We're not looking out for neighbors as we're supposed to. And the dope thing and the fun thing that I've loved about women's basketball being the small, tight community that it has, even with the sort of anomalies or the outliers that may be, we've grown together and we've invested in each other. And I think that's going to allow us to continue to be successful going forward. And that's what has allowed you guys here at WNBA 365 to be successful.
So again, folks, a lot planned, of course. We'll have more about that. But again, folks, look for some social streams, pregame, halftime of certain games. Again, we'll have more about that when we do, in fact, work out more details as we do, in fact, get closer to the season. Smooth, we'll start with you, and now we'll actually talk some basketball finally, gentlemen. Of course, folks, again, reaffirming again, with some more guests could be popping in sometime in the course of the program here. But again, thanks to Smooth and thanks to Todd for coming in here kind of unannounced. But of course, we're able to have Todd, our Facebook contributor, helping us out here today. Smooth, we'll start with you, and we'll start our basketball talk today looking back over March Madness. Again, Notre Dame, of course, knocking out UConn. And of course, as you mentioned, again, the two back-to-back buzzer beaters that, of course, probably, I think, made a lot of women's basketball fans rejoice for another year without UConn's dominance. Smooth, in a nutshell, give us your thoughts on March Madness 2018. What do you got?
Well, Jay Billis will probably disagree with me. Every time I talk about March Madness, I think about his article on ESPN where he wanted to tell everybody that this tournament wasn't, you know, anything special. But I think by the end, I think there were some moments that really, you know, had him take pause with that, because especially on the women's side, I think that the game was elevated to such a level that, you know, we have to be excited as a fan base, as proponents, as, you know, producers of content. You know, this was a really, really great tournament, and it culminated in a manner that I really don't think a lot of people were prepared for. When you talk about Notre Dame probably being the least likely of the teams in the Final Four, that teams might have that you know, the analysts or just fans might have picked to be there. But the thing about it was, and I think what was so fun for me to watch was, and I'll get more into this storyline as we continue forward, but the process, I talked about it before. You know, this has been a long time coming from Muffet McGraw and her staff. When you talk about the near misses that they've had, specifically talking about that 2012 national championship game lost to Texas A&M. You know, they're an organization and a program that's built a standard that is at that level every single year. And they've left the Final Four disappointed for a very, very long time when you think about 2001 being their last championship. So for basketball to have been played at such a high level for the duration of the season this way, and then for it to culminate in this manner and Notre Dame be the team that came out on top, for me being just being a basketball savant and somebody who absolutely loves basketball, I couldn't have pictured a more fitting end.
You know, I think, guys, if you look over the whole spectrum again, I was very disappointed not be able to watch a lot of the March Madness again due to just so many work obligations that I had to fulfill during the course of the month of March, of course, and just so much going on. And, you know, it was, you know, and I think though that this whole year though was great. I think just for the game itself, I mean, you know, we saw a lot of, you know, underdog teams that maybe weren't picked very far to get far in this year's tournament. You know, and obviously, you know, Notre Dame winning it finally, as Smooth alluded to, I mean, just so many near misses or close calls. They finally got their championship finally, and so much for that. So, and also, again, folks, want to again say thanks to those of you that actually played in our 2018 network ESPN.com tourney challenge. Again, we had 15 people play, and I don't think anyone picked Notre Dame to win in that pool this year. So we'll try that again and be bigger and better next year. Gents, let's move now to the WNBA offseason as a whole. And Todd, we'll start with you on this one. Of course, starting point for me is looking back at the relocation of the San Antonio Stars first from Salt Lake City to San Antonio, and now guys to Las Vegas, Nevada, where of course there has been one expansion team already doing wonders in the National Hockey League. I know all about that, but won't get into that too much. But Todd, sadly, again, seeing another team relocate out of a city once more. Of course, the Stars, after 15 years, sent to Las Vegas from the Spurs, of course, playing their home games at AT&T Center, now playing their home games starting this year at Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. Todd, when you probably heard the news about, or the rumblings about this, I think I was actually in the middle of working a game that night, but I was able to somewhat keep people in the loop about this whole thing. Todd, give us your thoughts, first of all, about the Stars as a whole, before we actually get to talk about Vegas.
I never like to see any franchises leave town. And I mean, being an indoor football guy, I've lost 3 franchises in LA, and it kills me. They become like your family, in a sense. I mean, you live and die with your teams all the time. And there's always going to be a lot of good diehards in every city. And, obviously I have a lot of empathy for the city of San Antonio, for their fan base, that has lost their team. And it's never an easy thing. But I honestly think this was one move that I think was necessary. I think that was an organization that needed to have a fresh beginning, because really this is not an overnight thing. I remember we went back and forth with this on different occasional YouTube shows and on Facebook. We were always trying to, be back and forth, you and I, Cal, for like several days and like even weeks. We were trying to keep all these listeners, up and viewers updated daily. Would seem like more drama and more. Are they going to stay? Are they going to stay in San Antonio? Who's, between that and the New York Liberty, it was a very kind of a turbulent off season that we're not really used to. But I think that is a franchise that was getting, in my opinion, stale. Attendances there have been diminishing, not just in 1 minute's time either. Really, I kind of noticed it the last year that Becky Hammond was there, when she retired. Okay, and I kind of saw that things were starting to go downhill attendance-wise at that point. And unfortunately, it did not help that San Antonio had the worst record in the WNBA one of those years, and they had they were going downhill as a franchise in the win and loss column. And even though the thing is, last year I thought they were making progress with Vicki Johnson as the coach. I actually thought that even though their one-loss record was not much better than the previous year, I actually saw a lot of progress, and they became an interesting team to watch. And very honestly, and I don't like to bag on anybody, but everybody knows I will give my opinion. And the reality of it is that I saw that franchise was going downhill for quite some time because of Dan Hughes' decisions. And that's why being a coach and a general manager, unless you're a Cheryl Reeve or Brian Agler, it's not a very easy thing to pull off. There's a lot of times conflict. There's a lot of time emotion in your decisions and lack of common sense. And between his decisions of who he signed, who he was going to play, and this kind of thing, really kind of things set the franchise back. Plus, his style of play was not very entertaining to watch. He had a young team in 2016. He should just let him run up and down the court. And it was so predictable to watch this team burn off the shot clock, and then hopefully that Kayla McBride or Hammy or someone could create a shot at the end of the shot clock. And, it was boring to watch, honestly. And I think it reflected in the lack of interest in the stands. And I think Las Vegas has proven with the National Hockey League now is a booming town. They have the population there has exploded. The time was right for these professional franchises to come in. I think a fresh look, fresh ideas, bringing Bill Laimbeer in. And I also thought he showed an awful lot of class because I thought Vicky Johnson did a great job last year. And the fact that he hired her and she accepted to be his assistant showed me a lot of respect. I was very moved by that. And I just think wonderful things are now in store for this franchise. Some of the offseason moves they've made. I think this was a necessary relocate. I wasn't so much thinking that when Tulsa moved to Dallas, honestly. And I've been kind of right about that because they have not really exploded as a franchise in the couple of years they've been in Dallas that I think everybody expected to. They still have a lot of problems selling out their arenas. They still have marketing issues that they can't even sell out a small arena. But I think this is a win-win for Las Vegas and a win-win for all of us because I think we're going to see an up-tempo basketball team. We're going to see an exciting team. And one thing about Bill Laimbeer, he's a winner. He's won 3 championships, and his influence over that roster is going to be phenomenal. And we're going to have a new rivalry now with the Sparks. It's going to be we're going to see a real rivalry develop that we weren't going to have it with San Antonio. Now we have LA and Vegas, and we've got when Vegas plays the Phoenix Mercury. People are going to be able to drive over, take a short flight, go watch the games. Fans, go back and forth between cities. There's just so much that can benefit from this for everybody. Not only that, but probably for television ratings. I was very happy to see this, and I'm really anxious to see how this franchise does. And I feel very bad for the people of San Antonio, the loyal people that were there. But I think, honestly, they lost their fans' trust there. And I think it was going to be very, very difficult to get back. And it was very discouraging to watch games there when you had maybe attendance announced or not, which is always higher because of tickets issued. But you'd see 3,000-4,000 bodies in the building. I think now of Las Vegas, if we can consistently see, even 7,000 to 8,000, 9,000 people a night, it's going to be good. And plus, it lifts the players' spirits up and it makes them play better basketball.
Smooth, what do you think? Obviously, this is already the 3rd time, sadly, in this franchise history that this team has moved. Of course, they were started in Salt Lake City with the Utah Jazz as their NBA parent club. Of course, they then go to San Antonio with the Spurs. The Spurs, after 15 years, say enough's enough. And then, of course, going to, a new I wouldn't say, it's a notable city to all of us that go there for vacation, but more importantly, a new sports city on the map. And as I said, the NHL has done wonders there. They've had AAA baseball for a long time. They have the NFL going there within the next couple of years. But Smooth, first and foremost, give us your thoughts about the Stars' time in San Antonio before we do, in fact, get everyone's thoughts about Vegas.
Well, here's the thing, and I think I have a little bit of I share a lot of Todd's points, but from a little bit of a different perspective, just because we have to be completely transparent if we want to push things to the next level. And I always try to remind people, because sometimes my criticisms of the game or my thoughts can be a little bit off the cuff, but I have to remind people that my loyalty is to the game first. I want to grow the game first, and the product in San Antonio just was not of WNBA quality for a very, very long time. I spent a year in San Antonio actually living and working there and spending most of my free time in terms of actually going places in the city at either Spurs or Stars games. I mean, I literally went to about every Stars game on the schedule, but it was because of visiting players. So when you talk about some of the dynamics that were at play there, it was best for a fresh start for everybody. The relocation worked out just in terms of the team getting a fresh start and an opportunity to really invest in itself, because I took a look at the history of teams in the WNBA, and sometimes, and I think that's sort of what we're headed towards with the Liberty situation. If the NBA organization is fully invested and interested in what's going on in what the WNBA organization is doing, then it works marvelous. It's a marvelous partnership. Things are great. You don't have any issues. But when there's any semblance of hesitation from either side, it causes a dip in quality for the other side. And you could tell for a very long time that Spurs Sports and Entertainment wasn't really interested in what the Stars had going on. There wasn't a lot of thought process put into the decision making of putting Ruth Riley in the position that she was going forward, because again, I think Todd alluded to a little bit of it before. There were so many emotional decisions that were made. I'm excited to see what Dan does in Seattle with the fresh perspective, with the fresh team, in a situation where he now is just tasked with bringing good basketball back to a city that deserves it. I was a little bit shocked to see him, cut Alexis Peterson without giving her an opportunity in camp. But I'm inspired because for a very, very long time, there was sort of a stagnant approach from his perspective in terms of giving people opportunities just because they were there the year before. And if that growth in the game hasn't been there in terms of investment, in terms of skill set, then the next step needs to be taken. And I think that's exactly what happened with this Stars franchise. And when you look at the relocation and what's happened in Las Vegas, it's a beautiful marriage. I'm excited for the opportunity. Bill needed to get out of New York. There needed to be a fresh face, a fresh voice in that locker room, and he's still good for the WNBA. I don't think that there's a lot of people that necessarily like his personality, but he's good for the WNBA in terms of knowing what good quality, high quality playoff quality basketball is. And it's there was a bit of the, emotional factor sort of building there for him in New York, but him being able to be this new voice and this new man, I guess you could say, at leading the charge in Las Vegas. I think it's a dope opportunity. We've seen Debbie Antonelli jump right on the train and take the opportunity as is and talk about the opportunity for the NCAA to make Las Vegas a central site for NCAA March Madness tournament play. I think that's a great idea because there's been sort of this hot potato, approach with professional basketball and college basketball in the United States that isn't necessarily there with other sports. And I think there sort of needs to be a marriage and an understanding that that's the next level. And that will be an opportunity there, in addition to the fact that there's going to be some opportunities there for growth in basketball. Asia Wilson is going to be really exciting for that city. I was also excited to see that VJ was given an opportunity there. I don't necessarily think that there was a lot of great decisions made in San Antonio, in part to, I from the very first day, Callan, I think you can remember some of this. I was never on board with the idea of Plum going to San Antonio. She needed to go someplace that was going to give her an opportunity to be successful. And that doesn't necessarily mean put in a situation where the system was catered to her like it was at Washington, but that needed to be considered. She was literally given the keys to a Ferrari from the moment she walked on campus at Washington. And so being put in a situation where she was competing with somebody who was in the conversation for Rookie of the Year and really one of the best point guards in the WNBA the season before, it wasn't fair to her. And it's really snowballed and gotten worse for her overseas. And I've expected sort of a move to happen. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know. There's still some time before the season starts. But hey, at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for the league to move forward, and there's a fresh face and there's a fresh voice in that locker room, and these players are going to respond to that.
Pat, I want to add something what you're saying, and I want to bring this up. Not to dwell on it now because it's water under the bridge, but the thing about it is what started really bothering me about San Antonio when I was watching this team in 2016, and they were starting to get all these young players, and Dan had he had Kayla McBride. He had, Alex Montgomery. He had Kayla Alexander and Hamby. And, he had all these players. And, he plays such a slow-down style. And he had such bias to veterans like Jane Marinelli, who honestly had not done much for the last couple of years. Her game was going downhill. She was just a body. And he put so much trust on her. And I watched Astuna Durer, who every time I saw her play, she lit it up. She was refreshing to watch, and he never gave her a chance. And the thing is, management decided to cut her loose. They let her go back overseas. They let her go, and they signed Erica D'Souza, and who was obviously past her prime. And she didn't do anything in the Olympics, and she didn't do anything. And it's like, I watch all this veteran bias, and when you have a young team and you're trying to sell tickets, what is it better to play close to the best? And they did it in several games against the Sparks, where I remember they were like close games, and then they just didn't have enough offense. When you have to play a style like that has to be so perfect. You can't turn the ball over. You got to hit your shots. And you play this low-scoring 1950s basketball. It's not entertaining to the public. And the thing is, when you have athletes, is it more exciting to go out winging and ringing and lose 90 to 83 and have an up-and-down tempo, or play a low-scoring style where every possession's life and death? And it bothered me beyond belief with that team that I don't think he got the most out of that roster. And that was the kind of thing that bothered me. And fans want to see excitement. Excitement brings, at least more winning than I think they did that year. And that brings fannies into the seats.
Absolutely. And just sort of finishing that point there, I think that there's a lot of people out there who have ambitions and don't necessarily have the necessary skill set or the experience to excel. And at least to this point, I think that VJ is a fantastic second chair. I don't think that she should be anywhere near anybody's head coaching position. And I think that mostly and I think mostly Dan Hughes is to blame for that, because of the style that he played, because of the approach that he had, and the sort of bad cop, good cop mentality that he had, that sort of, 1800s basketball mentality that you sort of mentioned. And that's why I'm excited to see what he does in Seattle. And I know this is sort of turning the corner here, and I won't go too far, but that's why I'm excited to see what happens with him in Seattle, because it's time away from the game. I've listened to him call some games, and as he's continued to call games over the course of the season, there was some nitpicky. There were some issues that I had with things that he was saying that sort of dissipated over the course of the season, that led me to believe that there was a growth in his understanding of the game. In addition to the fact that Joe Lloyd and Stewie aren't going to let him play that kind of basketball. They're not going to do it. They've been too well coached. The same goes for Sue Bird. And then you add in the fact that I've been campaigning for them to go big and move Stewie to a wing for years. However, Alicia Clark just had an MVP season overseas and is putting all the pressure on everybody to come take her starting spot. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Dan does next. I hope that he doesn't get too long of a leash in Seattle if anything happens there. I was sort of, perplexed when that was the decision after firing Jenny, but Alicia has a great eye for basketball, and I think she probably had great conversations with Dan. So we'll see what happens. But I agree with you in terms of this being a best move for all parties involved. A point that I started on that I didn't really get to, you look at what the Connecticut Sun have done since they left Orlando and the shadow of the Magic. I think sometimes leaving the shadow of a team that isn't really interested in your best interest is sometimes what's best for some of these WNBA teams. And the Magic haven't really done much since the Miracle left. And I don't necessarily want to wish that or say that that's the future for the Spurs. But, for all the investing they've done in their own franchise this season, their best player decided not to play this year. So
I want to say one thing. I have a friend that we do podcast on Arena Football. He's a student at Oklahoma State. We actually did an NBA playoff preview show last Thursday night on a station at Oklahoma State, a campus station, and we talk about indoor. And he's a Spurs lover. He's from San Antonio. He goes to Spurs game, and this leads me to a point because Spurs Entertainment, what their focus was, and you kind of brought that up. We were told up until that the San Antonio was interested in bringing back arena football to San Antonio. And I was told that they really were seriously considering it. But because of the problems that indoor football had with their franchises moving and folding up and the financial issues and a president of a league that basically kind of scared owners away because they wanted too much of a rights fee for new teams to come in. Basically, the bottom line is Spurs Entertainment got scared with that. They dropped them from any plans, and it seemed like all their focus and all they cared about to bring another team into San Antonio, all their eggs were in their basket for MLS. And so everything else went by the side, and that included caring anymore about what happened to the Stars.
And if anyone in this hangout knows about relocating teams, how about losing an NFL team after 50-plus years in your hometown and seeing them go to Los Angeles where they can't even sell at a soccer stadium? That's my case in point with that one. So I guess, Todd, to stay with the Stars, and again, we'll try to keep this one down. We do have a lot more ground to cover, guys. So I want to first and foremost get to Christy Wilson. Sorry, Katie, we left you hanging here. She says about the Aces going to Vegas. She says hope the team does well, and maybe the change of location might do some good for the franchise. And Todd, as I have said countless times on this program, even to friends, what have you, is and I know I shouldn't be doing this, of course, with mixing or comparing apples to oranges. But again, I think for the Aces to have a successful first season is not just about what they brought over and who they signed and who they drafted, but also I think it also kind of stems or starts with how deep of a playoff run the Vegas Golden Knights actually make in the NHL. They just swept the LA Kings in their first ever playoff series, again, going to the second round. And I think the biggest thing I love most is that they're not pushing the issue yet with putting the Aces at T-Mobile Arena yet. They're putting them at Mandalay Bay, maybe as a measuring stick, as Todd, you alluded to about their attendance. Todd, I guess, I know this probably doesn't weigh a whole lot, but what has to happen in your mind for the Aces to really say, hey, we are here and we want you to come out to our games? I've said that they have to advertise at the casino, at the airport, do marketing with the Knights and the 51s and the other soccer team that's there too, the Vegas Lights. Tell me, mind, what do the Aces have to do, I guess, to further, expand their product and let people know that, hey, there is a new ticket or there's a new team to come watch when you are either coming down to the Strip or visiting from out of town?
It's like indoor football. It's a never-ending job. It's 24/7. You can never relax. Off season, during season, it's a job of love, and you have to love what you do. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot you can make yourself visible with brochures. People that will have questions regarding season tickets, even a representative of the team that could talk about their players. Just different things that you go to different venues, like the LA Avengers used to try at the Rose Bowl. And just be visible in every situation you can. Try to get as many TV and radio spots as possible. Make calls. There's so much you can do. Word of mouth, telling a friend to have them tell a friend. It's, as I say, it's a selling job. It's a 24/7 job. They should be at all these hockey games, and basically having outside some exhibits and some fan fest kind of things, or just at least answer questions and try to get people signed in for season tickets and make a visible presence. I mean, the Golden Knights are my goodness, they've just taken off. I mean, I saw the other day on Facebook, Cal, they had a post where they were leaving to go to LA for Game 3 of the series. I mean, there's like 1,000 people outside or whatever. If you saw the video, wishing the team luck as they go on the bus and headed to the airport to go to LA. And, these are the kind of things you always want to be at. You want to be at everything visible that you can. And I agree with you, whether it's casinos, major shopping malls, you can't sit on your laurels. You have to constantly advertise. And that's how you build a base, because obviously you care about your general public. So let's be honest. The base of these teams is season tickets, and that's what pays the revenues. And the fact is, if they can build a season ticket base of 6,000-7,000 and get started, the rest will come easy. Then you don't have to sell as many general public tickets to games. You're sure to have great crowds every night, and that's just part of it. I mean, as I say, you make calls to people in the community. It would take all day to really talk about it, but it's just a constant visibility issue. You can't just say, here we are, come to the games. It's a job. Everybody has to be a part of it.
Smooth, what do you think? Again, obviously, I'm sure you probably don't watch a whole lot of NHL hockey, Smooth, but I'm telling you, this inaugural season for the Vegas Golden Knights is probably never going to be duplicated in any professional sport anytime soon. I mean, unbeaten streaks, division title, sweeping their first ever series. I mean, I was actually, gentlemen, in Vegas for the expansion draft and for the NHL postseason award show at T-Mobile Arena. And the vibe that I got from the people wearing Golden Knights gear was that the whole city is ready for sports. And I think and I said this too, I think on one of our podcasts recently, or social streams, was, here we blackballed Vegas for who knows how long because of the gambling issues. And now we're actually seeing a actual major professional sports team. You know, I know about the 51s guys, but an actual Big Four, Big Five sports team in Vegas actually succeeding and probably has the best in-game atmosphere and also the best home ice advantage in the entire NHL. And this has been going on for over 100 years. So, Smooth, in your mind, how do the Aces kind of pick up the momentum or, you know, feed off the momentum of the Golden Knights for their season? I mean, we talked about advertising. We talked about going to games. I have already seen some cross-promotion between the Knights and the Aces and the soccer club and the 51s. But Smooth, how do the Aces continue, I guess, to pick up the momentum from the Golden Knights' amazing inaugural season in the NHL?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that I resent your assertion that I don't watch much hockey because I actually caught the adult beverage of a gentleman who got hit in the head with a puck at a Caps game when I lived in DC.
Man down.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I've had some great experiences. Although I will say that I haven't seen as much hockey since, but I will say that I do. I watch hockey for different reasons than
Good man.
the actual hockey the average hockey fan does. So, but I will say that you spoke a little bit exactly about what has to happen, and it's already started to happen. You have to sort of embrace the dynamic, and you have to embrace the reality of the situation. And I think you know, as a society, as human beings, we continue to, you know, push forward and try to progress and continue to grow. You know, history repeats itself if we don't improve. And I think, you know, our generation in particular has done a really great job of, you know, pointing out issues with prior biases or understandings. And I think you spoke a little bit about the fact that we sort of shunned or blackballed Vegas because of the gambling issue. But the reality of it is that's a very real reality for any adult and for most children when you talk about that experience, because when you think about Vegas and the city itself, I know personally my experience, you know, the people that I know that have homes in Vegas are well off and have summer homes in Vegas. And so the experiences are taking the entire family out there. And so while, you know, Sin City is what, you know, people try to push it as, it's still just like any other city in the country. And at the end of the day, it has people and it has vested, you know, families and individuals there that are vested and actually intrigued by what's going on in the city, and being first and being, you know, really taking, you know, punching through ceilings and saying, you know, here I'm presenting myself for, you know, your judgment or for your entertainment purposes. You know, like you mentioned, we've seen it with the Golden Knights and now the Aces being there. These two franchises have an opportunity to step to the forefront, especially when you talk about going into the summers. It's an exciting time for them, and there have been some cross promotion. I'm taking a look, actually literally looking at the Twitter feed as we speak, you know. But another thing that I've really talked about and that I really think is really important, and as basketball continues to grow, especially on the women's side, we start to see more and more of it happen, specifically on the college side, where we're starting to see more names like Atina Thompson getting a job at Virginia, but more and more understanding that, you know, while experience and going off to college and getting a degree of a specific kind is cool and dope for the experience, for the corporate side of it, people that have vested interest in basketball understand what's going to be successful for basketball, and really pushing and trying to grow the basketball culture that's already there in Vegas. When you talk about NBA Summer League and what's happening in the summer, ignoring that and trying to operate separate from that would be an absolute mistake. And the Aces have already, you know, since we've actually been on here this evening, they've actually made a roster move that actually plays right into that dynamic, and bringing Brooke Johnson in the training camp, who went to school locally. That's automatically going to win favor from people in Las Vegas, even if she doesn't win a roster spot, because that preseason game that she plays in is going to allow her to live a dream that she's had from the time that she picked up a basketball. And so really focusing on the fact that you are a niche sport and being able to play to the crowds and play to the individuals that are interested, but also embracing the fact that you're again in Vegas, you're there in the summer. A lot of the games are going to be played during times where you may not necessarily be able to sort of invest in family packages where you may have in sort of smaller cities. So they're really going to have to step out and be a little bit innovative and be really avant-garde with their approach. And I think they've done that thus far. And having a personality like Asia Wilson, I think is a step in the right direction.
Quick question, guys, before we move on to our next topic here. Tal, we'll start with you. Obviously, the Aces will play their game starting at Mandalay Bay. Obviously, I believe it's one of the first casinos you probably see coming into Vegas. Obviously, you know about what happened over there with the unfortunate shooting of those 58 people at that country music festival. But Todd, do you perhaps see, and I've lobbied for this a long time, maybe in a couple years, depending on how the product is on the court and how the attendance is, could you possibly, Todd, in your mind, see the Aces moving into T-Mobile Arena full-time over the summer, yes or no?
How many people what is the capacity of T-Mobile, Callan, roughly?
I want to say between 14 to 16,000.
Yeah, that would be perfect because Thomas and Mack is too big. So, yeah, I would say absolutely. Yeah, you know what, though? The thing is, if it works out at where they are now, and that arena holds what, like 10,000 roughly?
Roughly, yes.
You may want to just keep it there, keep it as a cozy, intimate setting. I mean, if that franchise averages 8,000-9,000 a game, the way average attendance is in the WNBA, you may be happy with just having a big demand of seats there. And even if you fill the arena, it's 10,000 people. Although I guess if the Sparks came into town or whatever, or Phoenix, you never know. If it's a weekend, you may want to have the bigger arena, and you want to stay on one court. I mean, I could see that happening. It just depends. As I said, it depends on their season ticket pace and what they're going to be able to get. If they get 7,000-8,000 season tickets, then by all means, it won't look bad if you play in a 14,000 seat building. You have success on the court. Within a couple of years, I could definitely see that happening. But that's a move you want to be very careful with too, because nothing is more discouraging than watching games like Atlanta over the last few years, that there's nobody in the stands either. They have to close off the upper deck. So you want to be able to have a lot of people enjoy the games and go out. At the same time, you don't want it to overdo it either. And I mean, if they get a consistent 8,000-9,000 a game, I would probably stay where I am. It just depends on what they're going to be able to do with their season ticket sales, basically, in my opinion. I mean, if they get, as I say, 7,000 or 8,000 season tickets, then there's going to be a demand to move into a 14,000 seat building. Then maybe you can get 10,000, 11,000 a game, like the Mercury get quite often. I personally think it'd be good where they are to stay there personally, unless we'll see. I guess time will tell there. We don't know that yet.
By the way, folks, to clarify real quick, the capacity for Mandalay Bay Event Center where the Aces will play is 12,000, and for basketball at T-Mobile Arena, 18,000. So I was about 200 people shy of the 16,000 plateau. So, Smooth, what do you think, perhaps? I mean, Todd, I think, is on the right track, I think, in regards maybe you keep it somewhat condensed if they do, in fact, have a good product at Mandalay Bay. But, Smooth, what do you think? Do you perhaps maybe, depending on how the Aces are doing, either they move full-time or maybe, as I've also lobbied for, maybe have their preseason games at T-Mobile Arena right there on the Strip? What do you think?
That would definitely be a good start and an experience just to allow the players to sort of see what that dynamic is versus the two. But the thing about it is there obviously has to be some sort of culture, and there has to be an investment in the fans. You know, Todd mentioned it. You know, it's really not fun to watch a game and you know, notice the empty stands behind this high quality basketball. And I think sort of more of the focus should be on WNBA executives and brass, making sure that they're taking the steps in the right directions to be able to support these women in the best way possible. Because, you know, it shouldn't take somebody else doing it first for you to realize, hey, you know what, if we've got all these empty seats, why not go up and pull all of these people who barely could afford attending the game with their kids, and pull all of these people down to not only make it look better for television, but also increase the quality of the atmosphere that these women are playing in. And at the end of the day, these women aren't coming home and playing for a significant amount of pay. They're playing for passion, their love of the game, and the capacity to play in front of family and friends and as close to home as possible. So with that being said, and you're continuing to see a greater movement of that, with WNBA players starting to shift and preferring to go home. But you have to make sure that you're taking care of those who are taking care of you. And so we have to make sure that we're putting them in the best situation to succeed. So like you said, I think that's a great place to start, is potentially playing some preseason games there, seeing what the turnout is during the regular season and going from there.
Couple thoughts from Christy Wilson. She first wants to count up the Spurs. She says lost a lot of respect for them, especially with how they've handled Kawhi Leonard and his situation. She also says that if the Knights win the Stanley Cup, the city of Vegas will explode. I think it will definitely, because again, guys, we have never seen an expansion team in any sport have this much early success. Todd, that does move me now to the New York Liberty, and of course, they are going to be in New York for this year, but of course, as mentioned plenty of times earlier in the offseason, only 2 home games that are both camp day games will be played at MSG. They'll be playing their home games at the Westchester Knicks, NBA Gatorade League affiliate home arena with the Knicks and their AAA club. Obviously, Todd, and I said this, I think, too, guys, on one of our early social streams, is after last season, I felt like we had taken, one massive step forward. But now, with the Stars situation and with the Liberty situation as a whole, definitely, I feel like we've taken 2 steps back. And I've had the same feeling about this Liberty situation as I did 4 years ago when we actually started covering, started shop here 4 years ago, 364 shows earlier. And that's also about how we were here. I think Todd alluded to this earlier, but again, of how we were also here and hearing from Albert Lee and James Bowman and trying to get information about the whole LA Sparks ownership situation. Would they stay in Los Angeles or would they go to the Bay Area? Todd, obviously, I still say Dean Spanos is public enemy number 1 on my worst owners in sports list.
Yep.
Sadly, I think James Dolan is 1B, if not right below Mr. Spanos.
Right there. He's right there. He's right there with the Donald Sterlings of the world, Callan. He's one of the worst. He's one of the worst owners, and he's kind of ruined all the franchises in Madison Square Garden. But that's a topic for another time. I could rant on that, but I could not agree with you more on that.
But, Todd, what do you make, though, about the whole deal with the New York Liberty? I mean, obviously, I think Kia Stokes tried her best. We brought this up to on a social stream, is, trying her best to reassure the fans, like, hey, we know that we're not playing at the Garden this year, but we still need you to come out and support your team. The stories about the season ticket holders, having to cancel their seats after 20-plus years of fandom because they're not playing at the Garden.
Right.
I mean, those are the ones that I think hurt me the most.
Yep.
Is by far those stories of, these people that have been going to these games. Again, as mentioned, 56 years of Charger football down the drain in San Diego. And, hearing these people call into local radio that morning and just, bawling their eyes out, getting choked up on the air. Yep. Todd, what do you make about this Liberty situation? Obviously, they're in Westchester for this year, but what do you make about the whole entire ordeal as a whole?
Don't like it at all. I've been we covered this topic an awful lot on the social streams and on Facebook, back and forth daily. When we were going to hear something, we kept looking for news. I had a couple of sources I was going to for news, and that are usually pretty reliable. And I just thought the whole thing was handled horribly. For one thing, all the Liberty fans, and there are a lot of fans that are on social media and go to games. No, the Liberty don't draw what they used to in their heyday. I mean, in their heyday, they were averaging 14 to 16,000 people a game at a lot of times. Back in the good old days of Sue Wicks and Vicki Johnson and Teresa Weatherspoon and all the good old days and Becky Hammond of the New York Liberty. But the reality of it is, I think the whole thing was handled awful by all parties involved, including the WNBA, for not having any kind of news or any kind of updates. We go 2-3 months with hearing nothing. Well, all these teams were making these free agent moves. We were looking for a schedule to come out. We couldn't find anything out. It was getting very, very frustrating because there were first rumors that, hey, they were going to be moving to Philadelphia. We heard that, and then it was looking more and more likely that they were going to leave New York. That everybody was actually getting really, really concerned that deal fell through, and that because it was obvious that the cost of renting the Garden, it was not any longer a cost-effective measure for James Dolan. And of course, we all know, like everything else, he's all about the money. The reality is the Liberty attendance, although down quite a bit, still, 8,000-9,000 a game, which, believe me, is maybe it's not great, but I think a lot of franchises would take 8,000 or 9,000 a game. Personally, this drama, I think, hurt their team and hurt them getting free agency signings. Let me ask you guys something really quick, because I never got an answer on this, and you guys would know this. Did Tina Charles finally resign with the Liberty?
I don't think it's been announced yet still.
Okay.
To my understanding, she did. I'm going to take a look and be sure on that, though.
Okay, because I looked every single day for that because, I think all this drama that happened kind of hurt because a lot of these players didn't even know their futures or they're going to be. First of all, I really believe wholeheartedly, and I have very strong feelings on this, as the mecca of basketball, New York City, an original franchise, to me, it would be an absolute crying shame if the New York Liberty were to leave the New York area. So while this is not a perfect arrangement to go move into a 50-year, basically glorified high school building like Westchester County, okay, and with only a 5,000 seat capacity or whatever, if that's what it takes for a year or two to keep the team in New York until they can find a buyer that is committed to keeping this team long-term in New York City while building a new arena, or perhaps because it's important they stay in the New York area, because when they had played their games, when there was renovations of MSG and they moved to Prudential Center, it turned a lot of people off, and they weren't drawing, as you guys know. They weren't getting even 3,000, 4,000 people a game. So that's out. They have to stay right in the metropolitan New York City area. Obviously you're going to have a problem, finding a building for them. But the reality is, to me, they belong in the Garden, and as far as I'm concerned. But if this is the only way that this buys time to find an owner that is willing to buy and keep this team in New York long term, then I'm down with it. But it's going to be sad because a lot of people are going to be left out, as you said, that used to go to Liberty games, because there's not going to be a demand. Because, there's going to be too much demand for tickets. And you only have a 5,000 seat building, and you obviously have to keep some seats open to the public. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be tuned off. And I'm sure they're going to be so disgruntled that, they might even follow the team anymore. So that's a tragedy in itself. I just think it was because of the communication which set this whole thing in stone. That's the main thing for me. And I just think it's turned an awful lot of people off. That's my opinion.
April 6th, Tina Charles signed.
Okay.
So she signed earlier this month, but somehow it's still has not been announced by the league or by the team. Is that what you've gathered, Smooth?
I'll put it this way. We've learned over the years how much we can rely on the WNBA website. This is directly from the WNBA transaction site.
Wow. And there was nothing made public by the Liberty organization, it sounds like, either. It sounds like in that instance. So, Smooth, let me go to you now on this one. Now, again, I think Todd said it right, though, in regards, or I think I said it right, but I think Todd said it better, though, than I did. But, I just think back to the Sparks ownership problem. I think that's like the biggest one I can recall best. And again, that was 4 years ago. But again, no news. Again, we're digging. We're calling 811 to dig for information. And we had sources. We had Albert and James from Swish Appeal. We had Sue Faber, a local writer from Los Angeles, trying to keep everyone in the loop. Even Larry Burnett, the longtime former Sparks play-by-play television announcer, also trying to keep fans posted. But Smooth, so again, what do you make about this entire thing? Because again, I have some thoughts I want to pass along after you get yours off your chest. But again, 2 games will be at the Garden. The others are going to be played at the Knicks G League affiliate arena in Westchester County. Smooth, what do you think, buddy?
Well, it's a wild situation to begin with. At the end of the day, sometimes we have to go through hard times in order to get to the greater side of the picture. And at the end of the day, I think you guys have sort of alluded to it. James Dolan isn't anywhere near the top of the list or anywhere near the list of quality owners. And you can see what's happening with the NBA franchise. You can see that it's just a mess in terms of what they've done in terms of Jeff Hornacek, the handling of everything with everyone. And, Porzingis himself hasn't necessarily been happy his entire time there. So, in terms of keeping the team there, I 100% agree that team has absolutely too much history to lose and to waste just because of a careless owner, a careless guy who's never had to really worry about anything in terms of anything outside of his own scope of imagination. So in terms of the team being able to take the next steps forward, You know, it's going to be difficult with the situation that they've been placed in, but this is similar to, again, you guys have mentioned it before, the transition that they had to make when Madison Square Garden was being renovated. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that there's an owner, a buyer that comes and allows this team to stay in place in New York. This is a very, very niche league, as I mentioned. And so there's very, very few spots within the league where this league is actually going to be able to thrive. And with me being somebody that's pushing expansion the way that I am the last few years, losing New York as a home city wouldn't be an option at this point when you're talking about trying to add teams to the league, because the talent quotient is there. So absolutely, positively, there needs to be some type of solution that's found to keep that team in New York for the near and far future.
Todd, you know, I know I lobbied hard for other potential sites. I know I said that Westchester was on my radar as a temporary home, as you alluded to. But, Todd, I still feel like, though, that this team should be playing at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. I really think that is my number one spot. 1B for me right now. 1B for me right now is going to be Nassau Veterans Coliseum on Long Island. And thirdly is the new Islanders Arena being built near Belmont Park's racetrack in upstate New York. Todd, if in fact the Liberty do look for a new arena outside of Westchester and a new owner does keep this team in New York, where are you putting the Liberty organization in your perfect world?
I like Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn's fine. I would be happy with Brooklyn personally. But Callan, is Long Island's further away from New York City, right?
I believe I know it's close, but I think it is still a bit of a haul, though.
Yeah, it's a bit of a haul. And it's Nassau Coliseum. I know they renovated or they changed it completely around. Would even be applicable to play basketball there?
They closed it down and they renovated it for the Nets G League affiliate, and the Islanders are going to be playing half their season at Barclays and Nassau starting with the 2018-19 NHL season.
Personally, I love the Brooklyn idea. I think that would be I think that would be the best scenario for them to play. Honestly, I think that would be a good place to go and keep them right in the New York City area. I like Barclays personally. I would not. Why go anywhere else? That's my opinion. But
Smooth, what do you think? Barclays Center, Long Island. What do you think for a potential permanent home after maybe a couple years with the test run in Westchester County?
Look, the Nets have shown that they are willing to commit to a less than satisfactory product, I guess you could say. And the thing about the Liberty versus the Knicks the last few years is that for all the grief that the Liberty have gotten in terms of how Dolan has handled this situation, they've been the better team by far. And so considering the fact that the Nets haven't been the best team and they obviously are committed to whatever process they're trying to figure out that they're going to commit to, I absolutely would be on board with this team having the opportunity to sort of play in that building and have that opportunity to take advantage of those facilities. They deserve it with what they've been through. And I think it would really allow this team to go to the next level. When you talk about somebody like Katie Smith and having been really just involved and invested in this league from the beginning in sort of a different aspect, for the entirety of Katie Smith's career, she's had to, and I've mentioned this in my personal life as far as just my understanding of what life is, those that have the capacity to embrace or thrive in adversity or discomfort are those who typically have the most success in life. And when you look at the trajectory of Katie Smith's career, she started her career as a post player in high school, and she finished her career playing on the Olympic team as a point guard. And so being put in this situation and sort of being pushed off to the head coaching position of a franchise that doesn't really have the support of an owner, going to the next level and having the capacity to put this team in a facility that's gonna make them better and really just allow her to be innovative and have fresh ideas to apply to this team, I absolutely would be on board with that.
And just to bank up your point, Smooth, in other instances, we've seen the Sparks be better than the Lakers a couple times. The Mercury have been way better than the Suns have in the past years. And the Lynx and Wolves, of course, the Lynx have been obviously the better one, but the Wolves, of course, got in the postseason. So I agree, though, in regards to seeing that the Liberty or in some cases the WNBA team being better than the NBA counterpart. A couple thoughts from Christy Wilson. She says she's afraid, and I think we all are, that if the Liberty are sold to someone, They'll want to move them out of New York. She also says that James Dolan is the worst owner in sports. And she also says that she agrees with me that the Liberty should be playing at Barclays Center. And she also says that Long Island is close to New York City, been there many times. So that I think probably helps us out, though, with that going forward at this time.
I want to say one thing. I want to say one thing before we move on to the next topic about that. There's a lot of reasons you can't stay in Westchester long term. For one thing, you guys know this, for every sport, you want to players to be enticed to come to a franchise as free agency or what have you. They want facilities. They want to play in the big buildings, in front of the big crowds, which will entice television more to do your games. It's very, very difficult to sell somebody on playing their games in Westchester over an NBA arena. And as far as you're right, Katie Smith being able to handle adversity, I do think she is the perfect coach to guide this team through this time because, having watched the Liberty the last couple years as she took on a bigger role as an assistant after her playing days was over, I kind of sometimes wondered verbally who was the real coach of that team. Was it Bill Laimbeer or Katie Smith? Katie Smith was taking a very active role, always barking instructions. Bill Laimbeer gave her the form sometimes during whole timeouts to address the team and do the whole thing. She is the person this team through this difficult time.
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw that a couple times when the Liberty came to Staples Center just to kind of see that, and Katie really taking charge of that. Guys, let's give our general thoughts on the entire WNBA draft. Again, I sadly missed the draft, and again, folks, it's why I was apologizing repetitively back on Facebook games. We could not do our usual draft day coverage here because, of course, I had to work that day. Smooth, I think you actually had some pretty epically awesome Twitter commentary during the entire course of the draft. Obviously, the draft class is great and stuff like that. It looked like it was a bit more, they kind of, weren't so tense like it was last year. Obviously, this being at the Nike headquarters. But still, though, Smooth, I am still very, very pissed off and very upset about how they handled rounds 2 and 3. Again, somewhat, doing this to all those kids that, of course, were being drafted. Blake Dedunas from ESPN also said the same thing on Twitter. Smooth, in your mind, how do you think the draft was handled in regards to the location, the atmosphere, but above all, again, as I brought up on the web, in regards to, again, seeing rounds 2 and 3 somewhat excluded again from draft coverage?
Well, I wholly agree with everything you said in terms of the frustration with it, because this is a moment that these kids work harder for than any executive at ESPN has ever worked in their lives. And I will go on record saying that, because and this is coming from someone who didn't have the luxury and the pleasure and accomplish the dream of playing pro yet. But the thing about it is the work and the blood, sweat, and tears and the sacrifice that goes into potentially putting yourself at the precipice of even being a WNBA player or being a professional athlete and being drafted again. That's a sacrifice that these people don't have any understanding for. And it shows in the way that they handle these players. And I think that's why it's so important for you to continue doing what you're doing. And that's why I'm, wholly committed to the team that I have over at Barber's Chair Net and what we're trying to accomplish, because ESPN is the monster that it is because they have the financial support and the platform, but they're a monster that cares nothing about those that they exploit. None of the players that are actually involved and invested and that are broadcasted across their screens all day long actually get any benefit from any of the coverage that they provide. It's typically just satire. It's people making fun of or using their accomplishments as fodder for, really piss poor television. And so when you talk about, platforms that are invested in the actual athletes being empowered and fans being empowered, I think that's the groove and that's the next generation of coverage. And we continue to, take the next steps of being able to voice our opinions on social media and let these people know. And that was a part of why I had the commentary that I had. And I even had a thread that sort of mentioned some of my frustrations with the league as a whole that directly mentioned the WNBA president right before the draft started. So, I mean, obviously being able to, look at this as a whole and say that it's an issue is something that's there, but it sounded like this was this was a frustration that was noticed by everybody this time. And I think that was the issue last year. It took some of us that sort of understand the sacrifice that goes into it, having side conversations. But this time there was an understanding going in that, hey, there was a disconnect between the second and third rounds last year, and people were prepared for it and saw the difference. And to be completely candid, the disrespect was even worse this year. I mean, you know, Asia Wilson is cool and all, but there was literally a point where the draft stopped for them to do a feature on her. They didn't release or update any picks for them to do a feature on her. And while I understand that a lot of these kids in the second and third rounds are just going to have an opportunity to compete in camp and come back in later years and carve out a niche, they deserve that opportunity in that moment, just like every other player drafted in the first round.
You know, Todd, that's,
And I agree.
you know, Todd, I voiced my concern about this on the stream, I think before the draft that week. And I had a bad feeling in my stomach when I was working my game that, well, if it gets to round 2, we know what's going to happen. And sadly, we went back to the old ways again. And that's what, of course, happens. And I think a lot of people were very displeased, as Smooth said, as Blake said from ESPN, from the SEC network. I do think, though, that it was like a better atmosphere looked like, again, because we got to see the Nike jerseys unveiled that day. And as Smooth alluded to, though, again, stopping the draft just to show a feature on Asia Wilson. Again, we love Asia to death here, of course, and I think she's going to do wonders in Vegas. But I guess, Todd, overall thoughts on the draft as a whole, what do you got?
Well, first of all, that's a great point. Number one, there should be pieces on the first 2 or 3 players drafted, little bio pieces like you would see, during like NFL draft situations. Personally, if ESPN was not going to commit to 3 hours of full coverage, a lot of people even do not have ESPNU on basic cable. And ESPN2 on most cable systems is the next channel over. At least it would have been a smooth transition for people, where a lot of people probably couldn't even watch the last 2 rounds of the draft, which to me is absolutely pathetic. And I agree. And that leads me to a point that I want to ask. I'm going to ask Pat this question. How much input do you really think that Lisa Borders, as the president of the WNBA, has over such things? And how much of this is controlled, how you walk, how you talk, everything you do is ordered by Adam Silver, NBA office?
Well, I think there's a bit of a disconnect in these last few years in terms of the NBA WNBA relationship. There was an initial, when Adam Silver took over, I was very excited because, you know, in his prior role, he was very, very supportive and very, very vocal in support of the WNBA. But what I've noticed, and maybe this is, and by no means whatsoever, I mean, realistically, considering the job that's being done, you can make the comparison, but by no means am I making comparisons to the White House whatsoever. But it's similar to the president, vice president role. It's similar to a head coach, associate head coach role. It's similar to any relationship that talks about somebody moving one chair over and having, you know, more influence and power and understanding of what the actual job entails. And I'm not necessarily sure if Adam Silver was necessarily fully prepared for what that job, for what that role means, because some of the answers that he's given to, you know, what I thought were pretty simple questions as the commissioner of the NBA, I don't necessarily think that they were very thoughtful or very progressive in terms of growing the game. So I don't necessarily think that there's as much influence as there used to be. And I say that solely because the WNBA draft has become more of a social event than a basketball event, which frustrates me a little bit. You know, Laurel Richie and the current WNBA president, Lisa Borders have done a lot for the league, and I'm appreciative of the things that they've done. But I've continued to mention this before, and I'll continue to push it until I leave this place. Like, basketball people in basketball spaces is really, really important. And, you know, I don't know what Laurel Richie is doing now, but I never really bought the idea of a former Girl Scout president coming in and pushing the WNBA to the next level. And so that's been sort of my frustrations with where the league has continued to be stagnant in places that it necessarily shouldn't. And so it's a great question to ask. I do think that there's, like I said, a bigger disconnect than there has been in years past. But I think that has to do with, and I think that's a little bit indicative of the fact that the league hasn't pushed forward and progressed as it should have. Because, like I said, the talent quotient is more than enough. That, you know, I've talked about it the last few years, maybe even 4 years ago when my sister was still in the league and still, you know, considering playing in the league. She and I joked at that point that I could take a roster of non-WNBA players and compete for a playoff spot. Now you realistically can make 2 or 3 teams of non-WNBA players and players that aren't going to make a roster this year that could compete for a playoff spot. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, there definitely has been a movement towards putting more basketball minds in basketball spaces in terms of the coaching side of it. So I'm hoping it continues to leak over into the league office. And at the very, very least, I can commend Lisa Borders on the fact that she's been very, very vocal in the fact that she's been open to ideas and input and listening to people who know what they're talking about. And that's, I think, a departure from the previous staff, I guess you could say.
I think that's important in many instances. I think the biggest one, I think, for me, guys, was Jewel Lloyd said about Twitter, live streaming games on social media. And of course, we got our wish last year. I think we had about 15 or 20 games on Twitter. We have that again this year, of course. I think, and obviously, I think we all have, shown our displeasure for the league office in one way or another. But I think, in spite of the franchise turnover this year with New York and San Antonio going to Vegas, but with last year, again, I said something too during the offseason, maybe on our last YouTube show, was with the Twitter live streams, the daily fantasy things with FanDuel and with My Squad or what have you, that it looks like that there is being some type of attempt being made by the league office to, promote the product a bit better. Yes. Does marketing have to improve on many areas? Yes. Does merchandise have to improve on many areas? Yes. But I think that there has been small steps. You're supposed to, crawl before you run or what have you. I think that we're going this way again, maybe longer than we probably would have liked. But I think that there is still some, another bright horizon for the WNBA coming up sometime this season, which leads me, guys, to the 2018 national television schedule, again, that will be showcased on ESPN throughout the season, including the 2018 playoffs. But again, if you guys probably heard me again expressing my displeasure with this one, it wasn't about the number of games, guys. I think we have 13 games now on ESPN, the family networks, and plus the playoffs. But I was more, I think, upset or more displeased with with a very phony, laid out explanation given as to why these certain teams are playing. Well, we know why the Sparks and Lynx and Mercury and all of them are playing, because those are your building blocks for your foundation to set up for other teams to play. And again, I've been an advocate for 4 years of letting everyone play 1 or 2 games, regardless of how they've been in the past and their overall record, that everyone gets a fair shake to play their games on ESPN in front of a national audience. I know about NBA TV doing stuff and local TV. But if ESPN, guys, is serious about this, is, for one, make it more than 10 games or more than 9 to 15 games, and don't explain why you picked these matchups. I mean, I don't think that people really want to tune in and see the same stuff over and over again. I know that's why we're trying our best to improve our product here, and we always want to improve and try to find different ways for people to watch us and what have you, to interact with us. And I think that that's also a reason why, guys, that I've laid out all the games in a spreadsheet, but I'm choosing, I don't want to, give, certain teams, obviously LA being my number one go-to team. I don't want to always put them on Twitter when we're doing Gamecast, whatever. I want to make sure I give everyone a fair shake to be a part of the network family in regards to, Chicago and teams that, of course, have been scuffling. So, Todd, what do you make about the 2018 national TV game schedule, but again, more so about how the league really, came out and explained, like they wrote like a 5-page essay about why they chose certain matchups.
Well, how do I answer this in a polite way, other than it's pathetic? And we're LA people. I mean, we're from LA. I'm from LA. I'm the big Sparks fan. But I agree, for the growth of the league, who wants to see LA every time? And I mean, I look at this schedule. I'm looking at it right now, guys. And this is laughable. No offense, because the thing is about our coverage, and I try to be fair with. Even though I'm a Sparks fan, and Callan, you're not only a Sparks fan, you like the Mercury and the Liberty. The thing about us, we're balanced, we're fair, and we love all the teams. We give every team equal coverage, and everybody knows that follows us know that we give fair, objective analysis at every team in this league. Looking at this 13-game schedule, the LA Sparks are on 7 times, while the Connecticut Sun, who I even said 2 years ago, before their renaissance last year and how they did, was the up-and-coming team. I said at the end of the 2016 season, Callan, you know this, I said that them and at that time San Antonio, I could see the next 2 to 3 years that I could see, these teams becoming the new teams of the league, that they were going to start being the dominant teams as veteran teams like the Lynx and Sparks, maybe start taking a back seat. That Connecticut maybe was about a year ahead of schedule for the way they were. They just won over so many people last year with their exciting, high-flying, up and down court action. Seeing 90 to 100-point games. They're on television twice. Out of the 13-game schedule, the Connecticut Sun are only on twice, and that is bad. And I'm looking at some of these other teams. Dallas, a young, exciting team with a lot of good young talent on this team, when they had a good draft. Dallas is only going to be on once, and it's just not balanced. You got to give everybody a piece of the action. And even though it's a sexy thing to see the Sparks play Minnesota twice, I can see leaving that alone. But let's have some balance with some of these other teams in the league. They did a terrible thing only putting Vegas on once against the Liberty, Lambeer's old team, on June the 22nd. That team should be on at least, I would say, 3 times. I would say, honestly, they should have got at least 3 TV appearances. Connecticut should have got at least 3. And, I don't know. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it was very balanced. I think they could have done a lot better job. I also wish they had more games, honestly. I know NBA TV, shows quite a few, but I would have liked to see this schedule increase. I don't think it would have been that unrealistic to say, even though it doesn't really bring in a lot of money for ratings, but I can understand everybody, it's a bottom price business. What would have been such a hardship to show maybe 18 to 20 games, say, instead of 13. And then having the 13, you got LA. Well, we love LA, but they don't need to be on 7 times.
Smooth, I think there's a couple things that all of us WNBA fans can agree on. The referees are horrible, and television on ESPN coverage sucks. I'll just flat out say that right now. I think we all are in a mutual agreement with that one. So, again, Smooth, I mean, I'm not upset because I'm glad that we got more than 9 games for once, but I think it's more about, the number, as Todd said again, LA 7 times in those 13 games. I mean, and believe me, I love my Sparks to death, but I would like to watch some games on local TV every once in a while to hear Jim Watson and Mary Murphy do their thing. But I'm more, I think, upset because they came out and then said, here's why we picked these games, and it had all these number 1 picks and finals rematch is what I wanted last year, not this year. I wanted one last year more than anything else. And, the number 1 picks and the gold medal winners and all this and that was not thrilled with that side of the story. So, Smooth, what do you think about national TV coverage this year on ESPN?
Well, I think this is one of the few places where the league's hands are sort of tied, just because they're given this crapshoot of a schedule to begin with. Because let's be honest about this here. ESPN just launched their BS platform of little ESPN Plus. If you hate women so much, ESPN, you could have given women their own channel. ESPN3 is something that, has been used poorly for years now. Or giving them their own actual network station, because between softball, soccer, and basketball, you literally have enough women's content. Or even if you factor in volleyball during the NCAA season, You factor in professional sports around the professional sports around the world. There's a platform and a window that's there. There's a niche that's there that's being completely ignored. If ESPN actually cared about marginalized individuals, there's an answer and solution that's there, but they do not care. And you see that in the response with the pushing of the platform like ESPN Plus. Does that mean I'm not going to use it? Absolutely not. I'm on there watching Kobe's breakdowns of film every single day. But my point is, you have to understand and appreciate those that appreciate you. And I think that what the WNBA has to figure out is, if ESPN isn't going to put them in a place and in a position to be successful, how can they continue to market themselves in a better manner that allows for the league to grow on its own? Little random nugget here. And I mean, now that I say this, I'm going to have to dig up proof. But the initial idea of Twitter streams was something that I initially cooked up. Jewel was the player who took it to Lisa Borders. But the conversation initially started in a Twitter conversation I was having with some WNBA players. And it's an exciting time to think about the fact that some of these things are being done. But where I think Lisa Borders is having issues is that she's so caught up in trying to mirror the NBA as opposed to creating spaces where the WNBA is going to be successful. And hiking the price of the WNBA league access up every single year, when somebody like me can remember when it was $4.99, continuing to push the price up every year when the product isn't being improved. I'd pay $16.99 if I had access to every single archive ever. I'd pay that every single year and we'll have absolutely no problem with that. And even if you bump the price up every year to account for the fact that there were more games being added to the archive, I'd be okay with that. But you're telling me $16.99 and the product is basically going to be the same product as last season. That's frustrating. And me being somebody who's a proponent of it and a supporter of the league and trying to push the league, it's difficult and it's frustrating for me to try to turn around and have those conversations with people who don't necessarily support the league regularly when I have to rationalize that. And so that's where I think the league is falling short, is that they're putting focus on things that don't matter. I don't care about the 5-page explanation that doesn't really make sense, because regardless of what the schedule was going to be, nobody's going to be happy regardless. 13 games when you consider the WNBA has 12 teams. That's a slap in the face. So regardless, it was never going to be satisfactory to begin with. And so what the WNBA has to focus on again is growing the product that it already has and continuing to push forward and out of in unorthodox ways. I mean, women's basketball has a market and a fan base in Canada that's completely untapped, and Natalie Achonwa has spoken to it before. As that game continues to grow and their national team continues to have success, that game has grown, and there's a platform there that's completely untapped. And when we talk about the NBA going overseas and the WNBA trying to figure out different ways to branch out, again, you have to embrace those that embrace you.
And not only that, as well, Anila Khan, our correspondent, Todd, real quick, our correspondent, Anila Khan, who's from Toronto, also has voiced her opinion about that, as well as Coach Richard Anselmo, who's been on some of our social streams too. They both have been advocating too for the Raptors or the W to look at Toronto as being the hotbed as well, of course, with the Raptors' success as of late. Todd, what do you got to say? Sorry about that.
Well, you beat me to it. I was just going to ask Pat, I'm kind of inferring from what you're saying that you're looking at Toronto as a potential gold mine for a WNBA franchise. Is that, you think that's where it should go, right? If you're going to move into Canada.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at what the Raptors have accomplished this season, this is probably the first time that they've put together a cohesive product that actually rationalizes the fan support that they've had for so long. So when you talk about fans being hungry for basketball again, when you have groups and a growing interest of little girls and people who have little girls and people who care about the interest of little girls, that's something that's a little bit different in terms of the dynamic in Canada than it is in the United States. I don't necessarily think that there would be as much of a disconnect with the product in the WNBA, and being able to see that type of positive response opens all type of doors for different avenues of all sorts. I mean, at the end of the day, the international game is growing. Basketball is being understood to be a sport that can open avenues, and little girls overseas are starting to understand and appreciate that while it may not pay a lot, the WNBA is the highest quality of basketball. And so you have to continue to progress forward and try to accommodate the fact that you're going to have a growing interest. And regardless of whether the numbers show that right now, the women that are actually playing the game and growing up looking towards that as a future deserve your best investment.
Todd, what do you think about that?
He's absolutely right. Plus, there's a lot of basketball now being played in Canada, where a lot of these guys are going into the college ranks, even on the men's side. Canadian basketball is growing. It's certainly having a hotbed in Toronto. I would think would help the whole Canadian game. It's the Canadian college scene, and give a lot of opportunities for guys. For women to be drafted by the Toronto team. But I could see where it would be happening. I mean, the Raptors have been selling out for years now. It's an incredible fan base. So that's why I mentioned Toronto. I figured I could see that being more of a city than, let's say, Montreal or Vancouver. I could see, Toronto being very successful franchise.
Absolutely. I think so. And as we said with the Raptors' success, Christy Wilson writes in to say 13 games on ESPN. Don't like that at all. Twitter's probably streaming more games. She also says she's from New York, but prefers the Sparks and Mercury. And she also agrees with us, guys. She says WNBA in Toronto too! ! So she agrees with that going forward. Okay, guys, 2 more segments here real quick. Want to first get to this one. Again, guys, this marks the first year of the Nike overhaul of the for Adidas for the WNBA jerseys and for merchandise. And obviously, Todd, this is another one that we, of course, have been somewhat concerned about. I know you have been. I know, of course, I collect jerseys and hats, as I have more of those than I do suits for hockey games I have to wear. But Todd, obviously, I think Nike for year one wrecked the NBA. Obviously, I think they wrecked the Phoenix Suns really badly, taking away their the little sun pattern on their uniforms. They just did a few things differently. Of course, the teams will still have the same number and name fonts, with the exception of a couple of color changes. But it looks like we'll actually get maybe 3 or 4 jerseys, perhaps. I saw that from the LA Sparks. They have a black jersey as an alternate, perhaps, coming this season. The new era hats, by the way, that we put out from Draft Day that are also on our network social platforms, which I was, of course, drooling over here on our Draft Day coverage. Todd, what do you make about the first year of Nike's overtake of the WNBA, and also about New Era? Looks like also joining the forces too for the WNBA 2018 season.
I'm going to defer on this one. I don't know enough about that, honestly. I'm not really that much into that. I'll let you guys handle that. That's something I don't really pay a lot of attention to, honestly, to be truthful. But I'll let you guys handle that topic, because I don't really honestly know enough about that to really get into it. I just know that I think that, like anything else, I think that WNBA has missed an opportunity over the years in marketing, where if you want to go into team shops, you should have a variety of things, a wide variety of stuff in every team, in every arena should have a wide variety of clothes, whether it be jerseys, shirts, jackets. It just goes to the whole marketing of the league, just the way they market. I mean, to me, trading cards is a big thing that kids can get into. And a lot of times the trading cards of the WNBA don't come out till the end of the season, when the season's pretty much almost over with already. But that's just kind of my general thoughts on it. I don't really know enough about it to tell you.
That's good enough. That's definitely good enough. So, Smooth, what do you think? Obviously, year one for Nike taking over as well. It looks like maybe a partnership too with New Era hats. Again, those Draft Day hats that I was drooling over here on the network on Facebook recently and was just going bananas about. They are on sale. I think 10 of the 12 teams are on sale right now at the newerahatshop.com or on the New Era site. Obviously, Pat, Smooth, again, not really too enthused with the same number and last nameplates that everyone's getting. Would like to see a bit more variety. Obviously, teams are still missing logos on their uniforms, but again, those hats were epically amazing. I will say that again here and now. But Smooth, what do you think, though, about Nike's probably, obviously, year one, but also maybe a dry run for what they can probably do for the next couple of years?
Well, I'll start with this caveat. One of the other talents that I do have is as a fashion designer and as a conceptual artist. And I'll tell you guys that I can pretty much 12 times out of 10 guarantee you that the designer who ended up handling the final product for these jerseys for both sides and in the transition has probably never done actual athletic wear in their lives. Athleisure is an up and coming genre of fashion, but in terms of just athletic wear, the first run was always going to be really bad, just because they have to kind of see where things go, have to figure out how to design. Even after designing for the NBA, have to figure out how to design for the female body and the way that it responds to sweat, things of that nature. So really, there was never going to be this great product to begin with. I think people expected that in the transition because of what the standard has been from that particular product. But at the end of the day, there was going to be a little bit, with anything, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But the hats was a dope investment and a dope addition that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and it's going to be an exciting step in the right direction. The conceptualization and the ability to really Nike to really push into this next era of performance enhancing clothing is really going to be exciting, and that was why I was most excited about the Nike partnership. Nike, if you're listening or watching and you need somebody in that design room, you can definitely give me a call, but they definitely have to understand the niche that they have here, because basketball and any other sport is not going to be like another sport. You have to really appreciate the athletes that you're designing for. And at the end of the day, new isn't always going to be responded positively to initially anyway. And so some of the designs, there's going to be some pushback. I saw a couple threads that were talking about the old WNBA jerseys and how all the nostalgia associated with them is a little bit frustrating with the new transition. But at the end of the day, the women in the WNBA deserve better than what they've gotten for the past 21 some odd years. And in order to be able to provide them the support monetarily that they deserve, to be able to not have to go overseas and try to push this league to the next level, sometimes there's a bit of give and take that has to take place. And I think that's what happened in terms of taking the next step and allowing Nike to step in with this partnership and really have a little bit of free reign with the initial ideas. So it'll be exciting to go forward. New Era took a great opportunity to really take some of that focus off, and it'll be interesting to see going forward, because it's a phenomenon that I picked up on recently with dad hats in general. So I definitely was, salivating over the hats myself.
Yeah, those hats
let me ask you a
were
quick
amazing.
question. Let me ask you guys a quick question. By the added revenues that are going to be and the flavor that these jerseys are going to have, how is this going to affect revenues that come into the league that would, and this leads me to a question, that will allow the WNBA to increase players' salaries to the point where all these players will not have to go play overseas every year and burn their bodies out, where more and more players want to take a year off, and by the time they come back here, you barely get a week or two of rest before you have to gear up for another season. You're asking, it's like a soccer player. You're asking a player to basically play year-round. And because salaries of the WNBA are so small that these players have to go overseas. Will this affect this in any way, bringing in possible revenues that will allow this league to pay more to their teams, to their players? I mean,
well,
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that it's not gonna happen overnight, just because any changes in the salary cap is gonna happen with the ratification of a new collective bargaining agreement, which isn't gonna happen again. I think they signed an 8-year in 2014, I think, and so the change isn't going to happen overnight. It's not like this is going to immediately drive revenue up and the expansion is going to happen immediately. But what it allows for is an additional platform. And the thing about it is, and this isn't any disrespect to Adidas whatsoever, it's just the fact that Nike has a platform that no other brand has, in the fact that just about every major city that you enter now has an actual Nike outlet store. And so the WNBA now has a capacity where they could do exactly what you talked about, Todd, in mass producing and being able to put some of this apparel out there and put some of this merchandise out there that allows for some of these opportunities to be able to increase revenue and in turn be able to increase the output of the salary for these players. Because I don't necessarily think I know in the past that that's sort of been the issue, is just the fact that there's been an overproduction of merchandise that just wasn't a need for. And as the game has grown, there's a desire and there's an actual need for it. But having the capacity and the place for those things to go is going to allow for a next level of evolution, I think, as Nike's come on board.
You know, I agree, because I said this too on our social stream recapping the draft that night, was I think that this starts a new era, a new chapter for the WNBA and for this Nike partnership, because as Smooth alluded to, I mean, if I go down to Fashion Valley or Mission Valley in San Diego down here, go out to the Ajas Casino in the outlet center there's a Nike store there. And not only that, all the teams I work for practically, USD, Point Loma Nazarene University, they're all sponsored by Nike. So that's all I stock up on is Nike gear. And especially if I can go during the course of the off season, I mean, I'm sure they'll probably sell probably some WNBA gear, more so just the WNBA logo, but they actually sell like LA gear here in San Diego. I'm definitely am going to go to that Nike store to definitely get that. But and also I think it's going to come with time as well. Because like I said, I think that Nike's going to get a free year this year. Because again, I think that they have to, as Smooth alluded to again, is somewhat fix some of these designs that they've already put out with time and with more time. Again, I know I say about more time with the WNBA and certain issues, but that I think that as we progress, as Nike makes their mark and their stamp of approval on the product, I think that probably once that CBA, as Smooth alluded to, kind of gets closer to ending, maybe they'll actually start talking about maybe a raise, I think, too. Which I believe, though, guys, which I think only helps with what Team USA, with the women's soccer team and the women's hockey team. Again, they've both been advocating very strongly for equal pay, and I think that they're next. That the WNBA is next to somewhat starting their own movement further to get their voices heard about pay and whatnot. Guys, the final time I want to touch base on, of course, we broke the story again, but we will be taking our programming on the road this year, hopefully to Los Angeles. Todd, I know that you're ready to go as much as I. Just got to make sure that some of my friends are in place to go with us.
Good deal.
Yeah, hopefully LA. LA is going to be on the map. Hopefully Phoenix. Am aiming for a game in Vegas because my folks will be celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary in June. With that game I talked about the Liberty playing the Aces at Mandalay Bay. And also, guys, of course, the Coup de Grace this year for us is our first ever All-Star Game trip coming up in late July in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Todd, I think the best part, though, about this is, not only do I love, of course, my jobs and everything, but, of course, interacting with you and Smooth and our other fans. But, of course, it's getting out there, though, and being amongst the crowd, amongst the fan bases. And, of course, no better place to go than the ASG this year. Of course, Todd, I'm trying, man. Believe me. I'm definitely trying my best to get us to a game this year with some of my friends in Los Angeles. But I think that's the best part, though, Todd. But, Todd, what do you think about us beginning to somewhat step out of our comfort zone, I guess, and taking the show on the road now to be amongst some of our friends and followers and, of course, the loyal fans of this great league?
It's going to put us on another level. That's what it's going to do. I am really, really excited for you and whatever crew can go with you, whether it be Crystal or whoever, Tanisha, whoever goes with you guys that are able to go and take this trip to the All-Star game in Minnesota. I think this is really going to be a really super thing. I mean, I'm excited about the coverage you're going to be able to bring that weekend. It's going to bring in a whole new dynamic to our network. I can only see you guys can interview players, be at some of the festivities, have some live feeds. The possibilities are endless. I think it is a really, really big step. We kind of touched on it with KT going to Seattle last year, but I guess logistics, she wasn't able to do any kind of shows and stuff. But hopefully, if you're able to go this year to Minnesota, I think it's huge. Honestly, I think this is gonna really take us up another level on our program.
Again, Smooth, I mean, I'm always excited when baseball season starts and, of course, when hockey starts too. But, of course, I look forward to the WNBA season. Obviously, the league where season starts a month from today when I turn 24 and celebrate my birthday back home here. But of course, obviously, LA is always on the radar. Vegas is in June because my folks, as mentioned, are having their 35th wedding anniversary in Las Vegas. And then Phoenix is always on there too, just for the sake of getting out of San Diego and catching the Merc and maybe a Diamondbacks game. But of course, not only that, of course, Smooth, All-Star Game festivities in Minneapolis. I've already laid out, when I'm going to be trying to get in. I get to go to a Twins game while I'm there with Ben Wagner, our great friend from Minneapolis. Smooth, what do you think about seeing us, as mentioned, and stepping out of studio for once and actually going on the road and being amongst the crowd and amongst the fan bases of the WNBA for once?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit before about trusting the process. I'm all about circles. I like circles. So the thing about it is, in this life, all of it's, basketball taught me a lot about life, and it took me some time to process it and be able to separate the two and really being able to understand it. But the thing about it is there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. You have to be able to handle every situation with the same magnificence, the same composure. And sometimes in life, in order to level up, when you have ambitions, when you have goals, and you're talking about what you guys are trying to accomplish here at WNBA 365 and pushing the game to the next level, you have to take next steps and step outside of your comfort zone and do things that you necessarily wouldn't have seen yourself doing. And so being able to do that allows you to be able to make some mistakes and figure out where the flaws are in the process and really be able to carve out your own niche, because only you can respond to those circumstances as you will. And so going forward, it's an exciting time for you guys. I'm excited for you guys. I look forward to potentially bumping into you guys on the road. I'm setting my sights on potentially going to the All-Star game this summer. That's one of the plans that I have on the docket for this summer. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely the next step for, a dope platform that's, been really, really kind to me in terms of, supporting me and considering the fact that I've been a little bit misunderstood and trying to carve a niche for myself in this basketball world. But, I'm excited for you guys and just really being able to take that next step. And it's going to be really great. And I'm just excited to watch.
So once again, folks, as mentioned again, we're trying our best to do some more remote programming outside of studio this season. Of course, we already talked about the social streams that are currently on Facebook. We are going to keep those in the loop, as mentioned, as pregame, halftime, and postgame shows of certain select games that either you fans vote on or, of course, the games that I select as well. So again, just trying to make this fourth year the best that we can. I know that, of course, we had, a work stoppage last year because I just had way too much going on my plate with, and with some new jobs and everything like that. But again, for those of you that have been here for 4 years as of today, thank you dearly from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me and with us, all of us here, for all of our panelists, former panelists, current panelists, what have you, from Chris, my original co-host, to Shorty and Crystal, and Marquez and Reagan and Eric, and of course with some of the folks we've had on the program in the past. Again, thank you guys very much for making this last this long. Again, 4 years of coverage, and not only that, folks, officially 365 shows. Thank you all so much for your help. Also, thanks as well to Smooth and to Todd for joining us today. Again, folks, sorry we couldn't have more on today. Again, I put out an email, as mentioned, about 3 weeks ago. And again, a lot of people just did not have this day off, sadly, or they were either with other commitments going on or what have you. But again, thanks to these two gentlemen for hanging out today. And thanks for Chrissy for hopping in our live chat box this evening. Well, again, folks, thank you again. I'll say it one more time, but again, thank you so much for hanging here with us for these 4 years. Again, I know it's been a bit of a rocky road the past couple of years with work and trying to squeeze in coverage again. But thankfully that we were able to find Facebook Live as our diamond in the rough to keep you folks posted on all things going on. Thanks to Smooth for being a great guy on Twitter. And, of course, Todd helping me out on Facebook when, of course, I can't be here 24/7 to update everyone with what's going on. We will, folks, see you again sometime, hopefully this week.
Talon, I have to make an announcement before we sign off. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring something up that you guys may not be aware of. I have to bring this up. I'm very sad in the report tonight. If you guys did not see the note, Greg Popovich's wife today has passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
Sad, and this was just announced in the last 30 minutes. And they were married 40 years. They had 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and it was announced by R.C. Buford today. So our condolences and our prayers are out. It's been a hard year for the Spurs and for Greg Popovich, and this is a sad day to report that I have to report this. So best to him and his family throughout this very difficult time.
Absolutely. I mean, I for one love Greg Popovich, and not only did he play under Hank Egan, folks, who was a legendary coach at the University of San Diego, who of course sent Mike Brown and Bernie Bickerstaff and Eric Musselman on to great careers in the NBA or at the college level. But Pop, what he's meant as a coach of the Spurs, for his comical post-game press conferences, giving Craig Sager BS for what he wears every day or what he used to wear back in the day. Of course, Greg has been nothing but a phenomenal coach and a great person, and we wish Pop and his family all the best for that very unfortunate and tragic news today that, as Todd said, just came across the wire. Did want to get to Christy Wilson real quick. Sorry, K-Dub, again, for leaving you high and dry. She wanted to say that she thought Adidas did a great job with the uniforms, and she's also, as of now, not feeling the Nike uniforms, and she also sends her condolences to Coach Popovich and the Spurs organization. With that, again, folks, once more, as we do sign off here again, say thanks to Smooth and Todd for joining us here today, this evening and afternoon, and thanks to you loyal viewers, our great friends and followers on the web that have been with us here. Again, we will, hopefully be back with you folks sometime this week. If not, next week for sure, hopefully, as in fact, I have about 9 more games left before the season for me is over. So we will, again, be back with you folks hopefully sometime this week. Maybe not tomorrow, but maybe over the weekend, hopefully on Friday or hopefully next week. But please stay tuned to our social media accounts when we have more details and information. So with that, folks, for Smooth Friday, for Todd Mintz, Tom McClure saying good night. And thanks again for joining us here tonight on the WNBA 365 Network, folks. Take care and good night. Bye-bye.